special welcome to speaker Shri Krishnafani ji for making the time to be with us here today. Before we introduce our speaker today, and for all those who were not there earlier and have joined us today, Ritambara Wellness is a collective of like-minded individuals that look at wellness in a holistic way, not just the body, but the mind as well, and all through the practice of knowledge and wisdom that comes from our ancient Indian scriptures and heritage. We conduct corporate programs and retreats for wellness that looks at personal transformation and tapping into oneself to unlock our infinite potential. Presently, we are conducting these programs virtually, and all our virtual programs are uploaded on our website, ritambarawellness.com. Do visit our website and go through the details of these programs. We also conduct webinars regularly on topics that delve into self-discovery, personal transformation, health, harmony, holistic well-being, as well as the arts, which help us connect with our higher selves. All our earlier talks are uploaded on YouTube under ritambarawellness.com. If you would like to be a part of a community, the details of where you can connect with us are posted on the chat. Alternately, please post your contact details, cell number, email ID, so that we can add you to our WhatsApp groups. So let's get on with today's program, where Shri Krishna Faniji will be talking to us on ignorance, eminence, transcendence. Today's session will have 45 minutes of talk followed by 15 minutes of question and answer. A request to all of you to stay muted to the talk and keep your videos on. Feel free to post your question on the chat function and Krishna Faniji will answer any question in the realm of well-being. About Krishna Faniji, Krishna Faniji is a mechanical engineering graduate with professional qualifications in management and law. He has more than 41 years of experience in industry and academia. Currently, he runs his own consulting and trading business. Study and research in ancient Indian philosophical and spiritual lectures is his passion. He is engaged in synthesizing ancient and modern thought on deeper aspects of life and its purpose. He is a keen student of Vedanta, Theosophy, Jiddu Krishnamurti's teaching. Krishna Faniji is the program director at Ritambara Wellness and the enabler for spiritual and transcendental dimensions of holistic well-being at Ritambara. Over to you, Krishna Faniji.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reshmi. We will directly go into today's topic. It is, I have given the title as Ignorance, Immanence, and Transcendence. May appear to be somewhat heavy, the title itself, but we'll try to make it as light as possible because these programs are, we conduct them under the heading called as Connect to the Core. The whole exercise is how do we connect ourselves to our core? When we are trying to probe into deeper questions and serious questions, we open up certain channels to connect ourselves to the core of our being. Now, I would like to start with a quote of Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu says, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." So, on a lighter note, you can take it that because I am speaking, I do not know. The aspect which he is talking about, the knowledge or what is to be known, which is being discussed, is at three levels, as I said, at the ignorance level, at the immanence level, and at the transcendent level. Now, coming to the aspect of ignorance, essentially, what does it mean? It means that I don't know. No, I don't know is a very profound question from the spiritual point of view, because that's a very important step to confirm to ourselves, or to confirm to oneself that I do not know. That's a starting point. And it would also make us very humble in one way. Because when you say, I don't know, it needs a lot of humility and it also needs a lot of courage to accept that I don't know. So for all of us, ignorance is a starting point. But the ignorance which I am talking about is not at the level of only I don't know. There is a second level of ignorance, which is I don't know that I don't know. The second level of ignorance is what I call it as I don't even know that I don't know. A very typical example that is sometimes given is, the faculty of sight. Now, when somebody doesn't have this faculty of sight, that means the instrument is not working. The eyes, the nervous connection to the retina, those things are not working. The eyes are there, but you can't see. So the person who is unable to see or the person who is blind knows in one way that he is blind. But I'm told that there is a much serious problem with certain people, it's quite rare, but it is still there, where the brain center which recognizes the faculty of sight itself is defective. So it becomes very difficult for them to even understand that there is something called as, there is some faculty called as sight. So you don't even know that, one doesn't even know that one cannot see, or people generally have what is called as a faculty of sight, which I don't have. I don't even know that such a faculty exists. That's a deeper level of ignorance. Generally, when it comes to the spiritual dimension, this is what is more prevalent. This is what is very prevalent, where most of the people around do not know that they do not know that a particular dimension exists, a particular dimension which we may call as the spiritual dimension or a transcendental dimension. The existence of it itself is not known. Then there is another dimension to this ignorance. I have seen this actually. When we are interacting with people, they are unwilling to listen. That means the level of ignorance there is I don't want to know. That's the another fact of it. That I don't know is one aspect. I don't know that I don't know is another level of ignorance. And a more adamantine attitude is I don't want to know. Because I'm happy as I am. So that's okay. There's no problem, because nobody can force anybody to come to a particular understanding or see something. And that's the reason why most of the scriptures, whether of the east or west or whichever spiritual tradition talks about, they say that amongst the millions of people, only a few, very few would come to this. And out of those few, it will be still a microcosmic number which would actually pursue it. And out of that, that means maybe 1 in a million or 1 in a billion actually is able to reach a certain level of realization that is crossing the ignorance, crossing over the veil of ignorance, removing the veil of ignorance and going into that. So that is the primary level of ignorance which we are talking about, where these things are to be recognized. First of all, as I said, it needs a great amount of courage and honesty and humility to say that I don't know. And at least we shouldn't be stuck with the idea that I don't want to know. I don't know that I don't know is okay. You will eventually, somebody may tell you something and you may have some interest in it to know, and you come to it. So that is what the scriptures really talk about. The scriptures really talk about that kind of ignorance, because recognizing a dimension in us which is quite distinct and different from the general level of operations of our mind and our body, what is sometimes referred to as the body mind complex, with which we operate. That means we operate with an instrument called as the body, with instruments of senses, and then the inputs of the senses which give their inputs to the mind, and the mind experiences certain things, analyzes the inputs that are there, converts it into knowledge, and stores it in the form of memory. So most of our activity ends at this level, at the level of experience through the senses, an analytical aspect of the mind where it tries to classify information or inputs from the senses and create a body of knowledge. And uh, obviously you need to remember that, because otherwise every time it will be something new. If there were to be no memory, there would not be any progress in the human evolutionary process itself. But one needs to understand that this is the only level at which we are functioning, and beyond that we don't seem to be actively involved in it. That is the part, that's the main purpose. The main purpose is recognizing this factor, that we operate at this level only, but there is a different dimension to it, and if one is sensitive enough to certain things, we will come to it. So when I talk about the immanence part of it, the immanence part of it is, what I am saying is, the first acceptance, I don't know, is one aspect of it, but then to affirm to oneself that I know that I don't know. So we are progressing from I don't know that I don't know to I know that I don't know. And the added dimension is I want to know. This is what traditionally is called as jignasa, or the eagerness to know. So the Bhagavad Gita talks about a jignasu. It talks about 4 levels of classification. I'll not go much into it, but the classification of a jignasu. One is a person who is curious. And there is another dimension where there is another level of understanding where it is called as a jnani, one who knows. So we are talking about at the level of the eagerness to know. So that is the second level of it. The third more important dimension, which I'll be talking about and relating it to the transcendence aspect of it, is coming to the knowledge that what I am trying to know is beyond the ordinary levels of knowing. Beyond the ordinary levels of knowing, because it is not related to thought, not related to emotion, not related to feelings, not related to anything material. It is something beyond the faculties of the mind itself. So, coming to know of the fact that I know that it is beyond knowing is the other dimension. So, to put it much more simply, I would say that when I am talking about ignorance, the fact is that it is unknown. The fact of the matter is, I am ignorant means it is unknown to me. But when I'm talking about something which is present, which is there around me, which I can perceive and come to know about it, that stage is what I call it as the knowable. That means from unknown, we are moving to what is being called as the knowable. That means it is something which can be known. And that knowledge is something which is amenable to all of us. For instance, we can easily identify and come to the knowledge that just as there is a living force in me, there is a living force in others also. So, just as I am conscious about myself, there is a consciousness which is functioning in other human beings also, which is akin to what I experience, what I undergo, what I call it as my self-awareness at my own level. So I am nobody needs remind or tell anybody or show any evidence that I exist. I know that I exist. And I also realize that the life form, the life force operating through me is also operating through all the human beings that are there. Then you can open up the vistas much more and come to the knowledge that this life principle is not only restricted to human beings, but it includes animals, it includes plants. And if we are sensitive enough to certain things, we can also know that even in minerals and stones, this life principle is operating, though at a very dormant level. So this is what is called as the immanence aspect of it, or the knowable aspect of it. One needs to go beyond this to come to what is called as transcendental, which I am terming it as the unknowable. When I say unknowable in quotes, it refers to the fact that it cannot be known through our limited access through the senses and the mind. But throughout the traditions, throughout the millennia, we have a living tradition which says that there is a transcendent aspect to the whole of the manifestation, the whole of the universe and creation, and that one can come to it. I'm using the term come to it and not knowing, because knowing is, I'm restricting it to the spatio-temporal framework and the body-mind complex only. So what is generally termed as knowable at this level, when you call it at the transcendent level, it becomes the unknowable. That means it is beyond space and time. And that is the reason why all the scriptures or all the traditions talk in terms of not knowing it directly or not knowing it through the instruments that are available to us. There is I came across a very beautiful statement in the New Testament, which confirms this same idea. It says, if one imagines that he already possesses any true knowledge, he has as yet attained to no knowledge of the kind to which he ought to have attained. So when somebody says I know, it obviously means that I do not know, because it is something which you can't affirm by saying that I know. And therefore, this is from 1 Corinthians 8:2 of the New Testament, and I'll just read it again for you to understand the implication of it. If anyone imagines that he already possesses any true knowledge, he has as yet attained to no knowledge of the kind to which he ought to have attained. That is the fundamental aspect of transcendence which we are talking about. And the same thing is very beautifully put in one of the earliest Upanishads, the Kena Upanishad, talks about the same thing. The teacher asks the disciple, the student, that do you know? When he says about do you know, he is talking about that ultimate reality. Now, this disciple who has studied under the teacher for about 12 years gives a very interesting answer. And he says, I do not think I know that ultimate reality well enough. Not that I do not know, because I have studied for so long. But I know and I do not know as well. He among us who understands that utterance, not that I do not know, I know and I do not know well, he is the one who knows. You see the complication of it. The statement appears to be very complicated in the sense he says that if I say that I know, I don't know. I cannot truly say that I do not know, because I have some knowledge about it. I have some conceptual, ideative knowledge about it. So I cannot totally write off and say that I don't know. But if I affirm, if I confirm with lot of emphasis that I know, then I have to say that I don't know. This is the complexity or the issue related to transcendence. So we have to come to a dimension of understanding where at the first level, we cross over from the ignorance of I do not know to I know that I do not know, and come over to the other level and connect to ourselves saying that there is something beyond this whole thing which I am unable to as yet grasp, unable to hold on, unable to actually define. And this is not something very difficult. A simple experiment can reveal this. An experiment on oneself. If we put some serious questions like, are you the body alone? Or if I put it to myself and say, am I the body alone? The answer is an emphatic no. No, I am not the body alone. Then if I go to the next dimension of the abstract thing and say, are you the mind alone? Mind, which could mean the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, the sensations, the perceptions. Are you all this? Then again, the answer is, I am that, but I am not wholly that. I am not wholly that. Then the other question is, am I beyond this body and mind? Then a big question mark comes and says, yes, there seems to be a possibility that there is something beyond this, which I am as yet unable to come to terms with. I'm unable to come to terms with it. But yes, it is there. From a traditional point of view, a new dimension is introduced when they talk about the three states of general normal consciousness. These three states of consciousness, which they refer to from a traditional point of view, is that of waking, dream, and deep sleep. It's a very traditional way of putting it. And they say, yes, you are conscious that you are awake. Yes, I am conscious. When you are in a dream state, when you come out of the dream state, you realize that you have been in a dream state, which was different from the waking state. Similarly, when you are in a deep sleep state, when one is totally unaware of oneself, but when one comes out of the deep sleep state, one is able to recognize that, yes, I had a nice, happy, deep sleep, and that I have experienced something which I cannot relate it to my mind or the waking consciousness. Then the other question that traditionally we put is, was I there when I was in deep sleep state? The question becomes polemic. It becomes a dialectical question, but still the question is important to say that I did not recognize or I did not know that I was there or not when I was in deep sleep. But the fact that I have come out of that deep sleep and realized that I was there at that time is enough evidence to say that I was there even when I was in deep sleep. So this is a very traditional way of looking at it, but a very important way. And as I mentioned, the whole aspect, the whole dimension is to connect to oneself to that core. Connect to the core. The starting point is to recognize that there is an element beyond the body-mind complex. That's what we are calling it as, for nomenclature purpose, we are calling it as the transcendent dimension of it. And I came across another very interesting quote. This also is an interesting quote. It says, he who knows not and doesn't know is a fool. Shun him. He who knows not and knows he is simple. Teach him. He who knows and knows not, he is asleep. Wake him. He who knows and knows he is wise, follow him. So one who does not even know that he knows, he calls him as a fool. But if you know that you do not know, you are simple, and he says you need to teach him. And sometimes we are in that third level of being asleep, so we need to be, somebody needs to wake us up. But he who knows and knows about it, he is wise, and follow him, he says. So this is this is what, in a sense, we are talking about when we are talking about these three aspects of ignorance, immanence, and transcendence. This is where we are trying to connect ourselves to at a much deeper level. At much deeper level, it may appear to be somewhat esoteric, somewhat out of the world, but it is not beyond our experience. It is not beyond our experience. It is very much within the domain of our experience, and it need not necessarily be correlated with experiences at the mental level only. One can experience a feeling of tremendous joy sometimes, an ecstatic feeling, which may last for maybe a few seconds. It's okay. It's not the time dimension of it, but one does experience it. When such an experience comes into one's own field of consciousness, there is an inkling, there is a sense of wow, which says, yes, I have touched something which is beyond my normal level of consciousness. So if one is capable of touching it, one is capable of attaining it and sustaining it and continuing in that state. When I say continuance, it doesn't mean from the point of view of time. It is actually living from moment to moment, living in that state. It's not that you can invite it or you can think about it or analyze it and then come to know about it. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about a moment in one's own life where one is able to sense that joy, that ecstasy, that bliss, because that becomes the starting point for us. So that is the dimension which we are talking about. And I would like to slightly correlate with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita on this particular aspect of ignorance, immanence, and transcendence. This is something which is very beautifully brought out. In the chapter verse, there is the chapter 7, there is an important verse number 12, which says that I am not in them, but they are in me. So for an ignorant person, Sri Krishna says that I am not in them, but they are in me. The fact that they are in me is quite evident because he says that I am all pervading and I am there in all beings. The whole of manifestation I am pervading. That is the immanence part of it. But if I do not, if somebody is there who doesn't recognize my presence, it is as good as saying that I am not in him. But he is very much in him. Because I am beyond the reach of these people also. I am beyond the reach of such people. Even those who try to want to come to me have to recognize this fact that I am that imperishable beyond param. The term used is param and avyayam. Param means something beyond the normal ken of human consciousness, and it is avyayam. It is imperishable, indestructible. It is something which is there. And the concept of Maya, or the veiling process in manifestation of veiling the truth and projecting the untruth, is also brought into this picture to give an idea about the nature of manifestation. The nature of manifestation is limitation. The fundamental aspect of manifestation is limitation, because something which is unlimited or infinite is somehow brought into what we call as the finite. That the Vedanta talks about as the Maya. And this Maya is something which is impenetrable in one way. In one sense, it is impenetrable. So there is only one who really connects to me can understand it, others cannot understand it, is what he says. One needs to connect to me or connect to one's own core to come to it, but otherwise one cannot pierce this veil of Maya or veil of what is called as ignorance. Because the veil, first of all, covers the truth and then projects the whole untruth, which traditionally which is called as the Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Avarana is to cover it up. Vikshepa is to throw something or project something which is not the truth. So unless we connect to this core, we cannot come to it at all. But we can definitely see the presence of divinity in all manifestation, which is what we call as the immanence. There is nothing beyond me, he says. There is nothing beyond me. It is me who is imbued in everything. And a very beautiful example that is given in the Bhagavad Gita is like the thread connecting the pearls. You have a string of pearls. When they are closely connected, when they are closely put together, you can't see the thread. But without the thread, you can't expect to hold the pearls together. So, Mai Sarvamidam Protam Sutre Manigana Iva, he says. I am imbuing the whole thing is imbued with my spirit, like an invisible thread connecting all the various jewels and pearls to form a beautiful necklace. Because there is nothing beyond me. This fact has to be recognized by us. Otherwise, what happens is we will not be able to connect to it in the first place. So the first level of connection has to happen where I recognize that every other human being is like me. There is a divinity in me, and the presence of that divinity is in everything. So from ignorance, we are coming to immanence. From the ignorance of the fact that there is divinity in me, I have evolved to a level of understanding that there is divinity in me and divinity in everything around me. So when one sees the divinity, the presence of that divinity, because as you can understand about nature, everything is a wonder and nothing is a wonder. If we do not have that freshness of approach to nature, we don't find anything of wonderment in the nature. But you look at a child, look at a baby. For that child, everything is wonderment. And we can discover that wonderment also. You see small, tiny creatures, how they move about, or small insects which fly, or you see a butterfly. Now, is it possible humanly to create a butterfly in nature? It is something which nature provides, and it is imbued with life, with the ability to move, ability to fly, ability to reproduce. So that's a wonderment. You see a beautiful bird in flight, you see a beautiful human being, you hear beautiful sounds, you hear music, or you feel the fragrance of a flower. You are able to sense that fragrance through your sense of smell, or a cool breeze. So everything is a wonderment, and everything actually is shouting at us to say that that divinity is present in everything. the immanence of that divinity. Then what happens? In spite of so much of cruelty, ugliness, violence, selfishness, or whatever you may consider it to be very distressing and disturbing, in spite of the presence of all these things, life can be much more beautiful. Life can be a great source of wonderment for us, and we can connect to that beauty. And it is something which is auspicious, which is sacred, which is pure, which is true, which is beautiful. That's why the dimensions of manifestation in our sacred tradition are represented by the three terms Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Those are the three important dimensions of manifestation. Manifestation is a truth, a relative truth, but still it is a truth. That is Satyam. Then it is Shivam. Shivam means something which is auspicious, something which is peaceful, something which is of that silence and quiescence, something which is sacred, which can be sensed by us. And then it is something beautiful, Sundaram. So we can come to this and see this immanence manifesting in life, in the whole of creation. As I said, in spite of, let us not look at the negative dimension of it. The negative dimension has also a place in this whole creation. It has a vital place. I'll not go into that detailed explanation of the vital, importance of the presence of what we call as evil. It is not something created by that ultimate reality or Brahman, as we call it. The presence of evil is something which is closely connected with ignorance. If one is acting out of ignorance, the consequence of such action would always be evil. Such action would always be miserable, distressing, sorrowful, because it is something which is flowing out of my ignorance. If in my ignorance, I want to hurt somebody, the consequence of that action of my hurting somebody is misery, is sorrow, is what is called as dukkha, which the Buddha has identified as the first noble truth. That you see that this world pervading with ignorance is wallowing in sorrow, dukkha. But is it a permanent state? Is it something which is there and nothing can be done about it? He says, no. You can do something about it. There is a way out of this dukkha. So the realization of the presence of what I call as the divinity is the immanence factor. It is quite immanent. It is there in everything around us. If we are sensitive enough to recognize that, we will come to it. Otherwise, we will be as we are. We'll be as we are. So that is the fundamental aspect to be recognized. Now, when we come to the transcendence aspect of it, again, the Bhagavad Gita gives us some very beautiful insights. The Bhagavad Gita talks about all the three aspects of it. At one level, it says that they are in me and I am not in them. Yes, sir, there seems to be some disturbance. Yeah, kindly mute yourself. Thank you. So the Bhagavad Gita talks about all the three aspects of it. At one level, he says, they are in me and I am not in them. And at another level, it says, I am not in them. And they are not in me also. This appears to be contradictory. But here, the fact of the matter is to say that it is a divine mystery. And at a different level, he goes on to say that I am not in them, they are not in me, and I am totally unconnected to the whole thing. I am totally unconnected to the whole thing. Is another dimension of it. So, all the three aspects of it, the ignorance aspect of it, when he says that they are in me but I am not in them, is an ignorance aspect of it. I am the one who imbues all manifestation and everything is there, everything is through me, is to say that I am immanent. And the other aspect of it, when he says that I am totally unattached and I am unconcerned with the whole thing. He uses two terms, udasina and asakta. I am udasina. I am indifferent to the whole process and I am unattached. Because the true nature of that ultimate reality is transcendental and beyond this. And the beautiful example that is given for us to understand the beauty of it is that of the akasha, space. Now, the beauty of this space is that everything is in it, but nothing touches it. You can imagine the whole of the earth is there in the space. Every planet is there in space. But can we say that it touches the space? No, it is not something which can come into contact with Akasha. But the whole thing is there is in Akasha, whether it is a solar system or a galaxy or a whole, millions of stars and everything. They are there, but it doesn't touch. Yathakashastho nityam. That's the idea which he presents in the Bhagavad Gita. And he says, I preside over the whole thing. I'm purely I am there as a witness. My very presence brings the whole of creation into being without my acting on it, without absolutely not acting on it. That is the transcendent nature of it, and very beautifully expressed in the Shvetashvetar Upanishad, which says, Sakshi Cheta Kevalo Nirgunascha. I am a pure witness, pure consciousness. I am the only thing that is there, Kevala. And Nirgunaha, no attribute. Nothing can be attributed to me. I am attributeless. That is the transcendent nature of the divinity. And very beautifully in the commentary written by Radhakrishnan, he explains this divine mystery. He says, the explanation of the rise of the limited phenomenal universe out of the absolute Godhead is traced to the power of the divine. The Supreme is the source of all phenomena, but is untouched by them. That is the yoga of divine power. Though he creates existences, God transcends them to such a degree that we cannot say that he dwells in them. Even the idea of immanence of God is strictly speaking untenable. All existences are due to his double nature, but as his higher proper nature is Atman, which is unconnected with the work of Prakriti, it is also true that beings do not dwell in him, nor he in them. They are one and yet separate. They are one and yet separate. And he says, no finite process can ever finally and fully express the absolute, though this world is a living manifestation of God. This is the immanence part of it. This is the beauty of that immanence of it. Unfortunately, what has happened in the modern world, which we are surrounded with the amount of materialism which we see around us, what is being called as scientific materialism, is actually disempowering us, is uh, actually making us a pawn, a simple told to be manipulated by the forces of materialism. This is the disempowerment. This disempowerment has never been the undercurrent of the ancient Indian ethos and culture. They've always recognized man to be supreme. But today, the scientific materialism actually encourages a sense of this disempowerment. Unless we come to it, unless we remove the impediments, unless we come to it, we will not recognize that we are really empowered. And I found a beautiful quote from one of the books of B. Alan Wallace called The Four Immeasurables, where he says, there is also a transcendent element to your being that can be accessed experientially. This is what I mentioned earlier also. You can actually touch the transcendent element of it experientially, which is beyond the mind. And therefore, he says, there is also a transcendent element to your being that can be accessed experientially, and it goes beyond all concepts. This experience is frequently described as pure awareness. It does not fit into the Cartesian game plan. The modern scientific structure that has been created simply talks about a mechanistic interpretation of the physical nature. It doesn't talk about the principle of consciousness, the principle of life, the principle of evolution. It doesn't talk about it. So one has to gain the input, the insight for an unmediated experience of the ultimate. There is no mediation. We come directly in touch with that ultimate reality through our own experience, and the impact upon one's own being and mind is totally radical. And Alan Wallace beautifully puts it and says, it is radically and irreversibly transformative. It is that element of it. So, as I said, we have to come to this from the disempowerment to an empowerment. We have to come to that aspect of it. Otherwise, it will always remain as a mystery, and always we will remain at a very superfluous level. Very superfluous level. And another beautiful quote of the Buddha in the book by Alan Wallace, he says, the Buddha declared that half of one's spiritual practice consists of choosing one's companions. This is one of our great freedoms, so let's cherish and take full advantage of it. So that is the need for satsanga, the need for coming together for spiritual discourse, for a detailed understanding of this is what is important. Otherwise, life would remain as a mystery, and life would remain very, at a mundane level, as though we are stuck in something gooey, something which is unexciting, and something which is actually, filled with sorrow. So unless one connects to this aspect of immanence and sees the presence of God everywhere, or presence of that divinity everywhere, and also gets experientially connected to that divinity, which is called as the unmediated experience of the ultimate, the transcendental aspect of it, we cannot derive any meaning for life. Life becomes meaningless. So to conclude, I would very briefly recount the 3 takeaways from our today's discussion. Number 1 is recognize the presence of ignorance in us and how it leads to disempowerment. This is the aspect of the ignorance. One has to recognize the presence of ignorance in us, and how it leads to disempowerment has to be very strongly felt. The second is perceive the immanence of divinity in all manifestation, which will lead to empowerment and create a universe of wisdom, love, and will. What we call as one of jnana, bhakti, and right action, allowing the divine will to operate through us, thereby elevating the whole of human consciousness to a divine plane. The immanence part of it should lead to this: perceive the immanence of divinity in all manifestation, which will lead to empowerment and create a universe of wisdom, love, and will, thereby elevating the whole of human consciousness to a divine plane. And finally, the third takeaway is connect to the absolute transcendence and bring about a radical transformation in our entire being, which would be the greatest service one can render to the whole of humanity with compassion, love, and beauty. So these are the three takeaways of our today's discussion on ignorance, immanence, and transcendence. Thank you so much for listening to me.